Of day 9 of Tranche 1 Phase 3 of the Undercover Policing Inquiry. Today we've been listening to Angus McIntosh, who was a Spycops manager. I'm joined with Eveline Lubbers from the Undercover Research Group and Donal from the Undercover Research Group. Got double Undercover Research Group with us. There was a lot of things to process today. He was a particularly odious bastard, was Angus McIntosh. Particularly some of the... If I just start by just commenting on some of his last comments just before we finished, where he was asked about the funeral of Blair Peach, which he was very adamant was an event that he didn't think that the attendees were concerned with, had respect for the person who had died, that he thought that it was basically an anti-police event.
Could be.
I mean, it
could be, and you wouldn't know if you wouldn't have anyone there. So that is a sort of a full circle, because like Mitting interfered, asking, "Can you imagine that people may find it disrespectful to go to someone's funeral, to send a police officer, like undercover or not, to a funeral?" I said, yes, I could. First, he couldn't remember if he had been one of the two managers who had sent someone, which is quite incredible. And then he went a long way to say, yes, but there's, not necessarily the friends of the person who's been buried, but other people who want to use, and then he made a reference to Northern Ireland. Funerals can be a hotbed for trouble, something like that.
Yeah.
And could be abused, and could be what have you. And then he said, like, if you send someone there, do you want, is that to list all the people who were there and identify them? And he said, yes, because if we wouldn't know who had been there, it's like, it was such a... And then he said, unfortunately, there is people who don't respect the occasion of the funeral, not seeing the irony of what he was, the absolute irony.
Totally missed irony.
Of what he was saying, that because, the one person who was not respecting the character of the funeral was him.
I think, he made a comparison with Northern Ireland. So why were you spying funerals? Well, shit happens at funerals. They're the problem, basically trying to imply that all the people there in his world were essentially terrorists or anti-police. He couldn't actually see the difference. But I come from Northern Ireland. Michael Stone, a Protestant, went in and bombed an Irish funeral, killed a whole bunch of people. Let's talk about, if you're going to draw that sort of parallel, recognise just what actually happened. And I found it was really offensive, and for the people who knew Blair Peach, it must be triply horrifying to see that sort of level. And it's just like, well, it's justified because you're anti-police. As Evan said, it's a circular argument, we can justify it. And the report that they showed was simply a list of people who went to the funeral. There was no other context given, there was no indication of trouble. This was not, a report of trouble at the funeral. It was simply a list of mourners. You were put on the database for that reason. Sorry, how sick can you get? And he just didn't seem to get the point. And I think it really shows that attitude, really shows up just, you're left wing, it's all fair game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things somebody in the public gallery said as soon as we broke after that was, he just thinks we're all scum.
Yeah.
And I think that really summed up, where he's coming from. Really, just a lack of humanity, really.
And that came through in so much of his evidence today. There was no sense of apology. Crafted lots of faults yesterday. He at least attempted to apologise. He at least recognised that he had to do a PR thing. There was no sense of that here. It was just like, I support the lads. They did what they did. There's a different
yeah.
era, and just let him on with it.
Yeah, there's also a thing about the. It was put to him that it was an abuse of police powers for an undercover officer to have sex with a target because by definition he was there as an act of deceit in the first place, and he just didn't accept that. He was like, well, does that mean that I don't know. Do people always check the jobs of people they sleep with and go, oh no, I definitely won't have sex with you because you're a policeman or a postman. Or a postman. Or a postman fucking line. What the fuck is that about? Like, fuck you. I mean, honestly, I gotta be fair. Like, I've seen some odious bastards up on the stand at this inquiry, but I think maybe it's just the recency bias, but like, I think that Angus McIntosh was the most unpleasant of them so far.
I think he was the most brutally honest unpleasantness. It's like, I don't think he's any different from any of the other ones up on the stand.
Yeah, sure.
They had a bit more veneer painted over them. He was saying what they actually thought on the ground. I don't think his opinions are any different from the likes Kraft and Co.
Yeah, and at least he was honest about, the security of the operation. So the secrecy of the SDS was the one thing that counted. Anything else was it kind of, yeah. So the summary of this week is like anything could happen as long as it wouldn't come out, and that kind of gives them a sort of free card to do anything what they wanted. And what someone said at the public gallery today was that, in fact, in this way, on the one hand, they would never, whatever they did, they knew they would not get disciplined because that would, expose the SDS. But on the other hand, sort of the unit had Special Branch and Scotland Yard in a hold or held them hostage because they knew that, in principle, they could spill the beans and they could embarrass, a word that we've heard a lot, Scotland Yard as such. So they had a kind of, a guaranteed continuation of the unit, because whenever it would come out, it would be a scandal, as we've seen it is when it came out after 40 or 50 years. Like I remember yesterday, was it Kraft who said, like, what were you so afraid of? Well, to be
attacked by the media.
Yeah, attacked by the media, and this is exactly what happened. This is what they were afraid of, and nothing else.
Yeah, I mean, he veers into blaming the inquiry, didn't he? He was almost like had a go at the inquiry. He could have to stop himself from.
The Rick Gibson stuff. The fact
Yeah.
that Rick Gibson had slept with some people. So Rick Gibson was caused the inquiry through his misbehaviour and was like. But then,
Richard Clark was the
Richard Clark or Rick Gibson. But then the context is, why is this inquiry happening? This should just remain secret. You're almost betraying the state by doing this in public. I think that almost everything that he talks about today was kind of framed in that. You see it when he talks about visiting the wives of the undercovers. There's no real genuine sense of their welfare. So always there. So if there's anything happen, here's a number. But it's like he didn't even know that Rick Gibson had split up with his long-term partner at the time.
Oh, Vincent Harvey. Yeah.
Vincent Harvey. Sorry. Yeah. Where it's just like, so you see the veneer. You're fairly certain the reason they visited the wives is to make sure that they weren't going to do anything. They could manage this. Manage the situation in terms of damage control.
And also take care of the welfare of their husbands. They were put in sort of like a sort of holy position. Just like one of the lawyers said, there's this Madonna whore complex as well. The wives were, although they weren't really cared for, but they were supposed to be sort of. The Holy Grail, not the Holy Grail, but the safe home front, keeping their men from doing bad things, and in that picture or that framing, the female activists were those who seduced our poor undercover officers and giving them sexual transmittable diseases next, basically.
Yeah, it just shows the attitude towards women generally really came across. There was no, as I said earlier, there was no sense of contrition on the damage done. I would also quite like to know how many undercovers end up getting divorced after their deployments. If there was such great welfare and maintaining of morale. I suspect it was quite high.
Yeah, I think we can probably get, I remember some time ago Mitting saying that he considered that any former undercover officer who was still married to the wife he had whilst he was deployed, then obviously there wouldn't have been any adultery because they were still married. So I guess if they didn't get full anonymity, both cover name and real name, then they probably got divorced. It kind of says a lot about it. But apart from those, all the things we've been talking about, quite recent comments just in the last hour or so. What was your overall view of Angus McIntosh today? Then, did you find? He came up with some quite interesting quotes about why there hadn't been an infiltration of the far right because they were violent and criminal, and besides, you get the information from the far left. About the far right. He had a fair few...
Yeah, that was a funny one, yeah.
He had a fair few choice quotes on a few things.
Yeah, I think what you really got from him was this, more of a sense of the genuineness of what life was like in the unit, and the fact that they clearly were engaging in all sorts of misogynist, sexist behaviour. They just don't see it like that. They think they're able to define that with just what's in their own heads, and it's quite clearly they weren't. Here's an example of just they got on with the job. They clearly had no guidance, they had no training, they inherited the system, they didn't see anything wrong with it.
They didn't think. They did not have any. Well, and if they thought, like the HN244 who was sent to the funeral said himself, that he saw no reason to go there, and he was sort of whacked off the table today, saying, well, without going there, you don't know whether there was, and whether there was a danger or not, a public order risk. And that kind of sums up the entire reason for existence. If you don't go there, if you don't look, you don't know whether there is going to be a risk. But you can turn that around, like we've mentioned before. People got mentions in special branch because they were spied on, and if you got mentioned like 3 or 4 times, you had a registry file opened on you. So it works both. The risk is far greater if you turn it around. And in general, I am kind of amazed by the wide spectrum of awfulness of managers. The grades in how much they remember and how much they claim not to remember. You think you've seen it all, and it's different every day still. There's still sort of layers to how much you can claim not to remember and still have an opinion on. That is just as awful. I agree with Donal here that he was honest. He gave a sort of a look into the way of thinking more even than Kraft yesterday, although he said some awful things as well.
Kraft is, one of the boys. He's not so much one of the boys, but old school club. Slightly posher. Where this is, not quite the same class. Mitting didn't have the same relationship with him. Wasn't the same set of smiles. Didn't live near. But so one of the things that wasn't asked, and we did try to put it forward, is he's not a minor cop. Like Harvey, he goes on to become high-ranking officer. He becomes the national coordinator of Special Branch Sports Policing in the 80s and 90s. So he oversees all Special Branch work around airports and reports and stuff. So he's the one
Incredibly senior role.
Who's monitoring all the people coming in as reports and doing reports back. So if somebody's getting stopped and searched, it's because it's his people who got the intelligence, or they going through somebody and say, oh, there's the person wearing an anti-fascist badge. Let's make a note of their name and report it back to Special Branch. And we know that core participants were, being targeted and having their bags searched and stuff. But there's no question about how that happened. And it's a thing. So many of these managers have gone on to high-ranking positions, and the inquiry is not letting us get to explore that because clearly it's of importance.
Yeah, absolutely. I think on that thing of the inquiry not letting us explore. I mean, I did think that the questioning today. I forget her name, Hummingbird.
No, it's
anyway.
Rebecca Smith.
Yeah, right. You heard the inquiry lawyer. The questioning. The real lack of follow-up questions. That you get the impression she wasn't really listening to the answers because some of them were so shocking that they really demanded some sort of follow-up, and we didn't get those kind of follow-ups until she had to be pressed to do it during the supplementary question section, and then. It loses something by not happening at the time. I thought Mitting's interventions were very good, but I thought her questioning was probably the poorest we've seen in the inquiry. Did you have any thoughts about any of that?
I think the barristers are hemmed in. So there is a list of issues which the inquiry is. It's about 200 or between 150 200 issues that the inquiry is supposed to ask questions about that all come under the terms of reference. And you can see they're effectively following that. It's the same questions in the same order each time, and that doesn't really allow for that more free-flowing exposure. There's definitely you times when you just stop and let the witness speak. Don't keep moving on. Actually, just take a bit more time. So they are rattling through it to a little bit, but they are also hemmed in by what they cannot ask, and they're also seemingly quite terrified of letting anything slip. You constantly hear the same, without saying names, without things. It's like don't slip up. No. So that's clearly playing on their mind quite a bit.
Yeah, I did. I just found it incredibly frustrating, particularly with some of the more shocking things he was saying about around the sexual stuff, around the Blair Peach stuff. That we really could have done with a bit more pressing on those topics.
Yeah, and there was clear contradictions with the evidence that Kraft gave yesterday. Mitting started to probe some of this, like the fact that everyone was saying he was at an important meeting and he was going, no, he wasn't. And it's like, you're named as such, you're the officer with a Scottish name that was told this. But you're also, it's two professional intelligence agents, and let's not forget these are intelligence agents. They're not just plug or what passes as intelligence agents. So it all has to be measured through that lens, and you can see that Mitting was trying to go. You're contradicting each other. One of you can't be telling the truth. In fact, neither of you could be telling the truth. Who knows?
Yeah, very true. I mean, actually, that's something I was either one of them's lying or the other one's lying. It's like, well, actually, probably they're both lying about some part of it. Let's be realistic. Once again, we heard him. This witness conveniently couldn't remember, or was pretty sure he wasn't there. A number of things.
It was at a court. Yeah.
It was at a court. It was at a. Sorry, sir, I wasn't in that day.
You see a lot of that in this phase. Oh, I can't remember. Oh, well, here's a document that shows you were there. I was like, okay, then I was there.
Yeah.
It's like, they're not even apologizing for having attempted to ignore the fact. It didn't wash for me, and I hopefully it didn't, you kind of worry that the inquiry kind of takes too many of these things at face value. I'm not sure whether it will. Certainly this whole thing about I was away a lot at the time, even though it's there in black and white that he was there. There's other evidence from other officers that he was there.
The many shades of pale of how can you say no? I distanced myself from it. I wasn't there. I don't know. I wasn't responsible.
And
someone else.
How convenient the managers who seem to have done it are all dead. It's like, Mike Ferguson's dead. Neil is dead. It's just like, oh, it wasn't me. And there's just so much of this pushback.
Yeah. Well, it's so much more convenient to throw a corpse under the bus, isn't it? That's We are also joined by Alison from Police Spies Out of Lives, who's off screen.
I want to just talk about Omerta. Do you know Omerta?
The mafia.
Code of silence, yeah. This idea that you talked about yesterday, I think with Rob Evans, about closing rank. What I think is interesting is the managers are speaking exactly the same language as each other, and it's different language to what the undercover cops in their squad at the time, isn't it? So that stuff about, there's two examples of it. One, I think I mentioned earlier about the banter. What McIntosh has just said earlier about banter is very similar to what Richard Walker said in his statement this morning about just because the banter doesn't mean they mean it, the men, and it's just language and they don't really mean it. And then this idea that Kraft said yesterday about, you don't need to have a legally endorsed exchange of CVs before sexual activity, and that's the same as what he's just said about you don't ask what someone's job. Do you have to ask just whether someone's a policeman or a postman before you have sex with them? So to me, they've been coached. I mean, it's not a surprise, is it? But it's like the cops kind of comparing notes before. Literally like swapping their notebooks and making sure they've got the same story. That's what it feels like to me. And I think that I think Mitting can see that as well. I think the inquiry can see it. I mean, I don't know where that leads us. Oh, and the other bit, just that disgusting comment about Blair Peach's funeral, and his literally nod to the chairman of, like in Northern Ireland. Really like blatant kind of appeal to, we're all on the same side, you and me. You get it. They don't, but you do. It's nasty. I mean, I tried to say. You've said, Tom, that it's a bit like being back at school, and I was always very good at school, sensible, nice. And I'm, even I am feeling like I want to sort of shout out from the back and say, it's just ridiculous. I didn't like that at all. No, and I know that Jessica has talked, we talked about people feeling triggered, and I know we've got this room for that reason, and I don't like that word really, but I do feel really pissed off. Pissed off, because it's just, they're taking the piss. That's how it feels. It really, I think, all week, I've listened all week, and there are times where I just don't believe them. And that's one thing, they've found ways of saying, I can't recall or I can't answer that, which is helpful for us at future times where maybe we can't recall or we can't answer things. And that's frustrating. But actually, hearing their opinions and their attitudes and their beliefs
it's even worse.
It's even worse.
In a way,
But it's also bringing it out. It's actually really showing it's like, special branch of Mystique, MI5 of Mystique, it was just an old boys club, as misogynist as, if not worse, and because they were giving no proper oversight, they took it to the extremes. That's what happens in all these situations when you give, absolute power to a bunch of people.
All they are just protecting their reputation, aren't they? Yeah. That's why they're so outraged. They're outraged because somehow this has all been exposed because of the behaviour of a number of people, and we were doing a good job for the greater good, keeping the Queen's peace. I mean, I keep saying it because that is what they keep coming back to, and essentially they are pissed off because their reputation is now in shreds. It's just
people can see how badly managed the unit actually is as well.
Yeah,
this is like this isn't management. But also on the reputation point, it's quite clear the managers are quite happy to hang the undercovers out to dry. I felt that really came across in the last 2 days. That if I was the undercovers, I would be quite angry about how they're being portrayed.
I think that's the most interesting. That's always going to be one of the most that kind of tension, and it's there that we're going to kind of find nuggets of gold. I think between the tension between individual officers perhaps and between the officers and the managers.
Well, I don't know who said it, but they may need more lawyers in the next tranche, because they can't be represented, managers and undercovers, although there is an overlap, of course. But after this week, I can't see how you can be represented. This contrasting interests. Like if you've been hung out to dry by your manager, you don't want to be represented by the same group of lawyers.
I mean, that was quite telling when Mitting was asked about the HN244 who'd attended Blair Peach's funeral, who said that there wasn't any kind of public order concern about that. And he said, "Oh, do you accept that there was no public order concern?" And he's like, his answer was basically, "What would he know? He was just a field officer. What would he know about such matters?"
Yeah.
And it's just like, "Oh right, really? Wow, you really don't have any respect for anybody else in your squad." Like that comes across.
But at the same time, they're all highly trained and would have known exactly what to report on. It's like they're constantly trying to have their cake to eat it. It's like they're either highly trained or they didn't know it. Highly trained, but no, actually they're both. It's like you're not circle squares. You're not actually matching this up anywhere along the line. It's really hollow.
Yeah, not very much. Is there anything else anybody wants to add about today's proceedings?
Oh, it's almost over. Thank God.
Yeah. I mean, we've got
One more day.
One more day. We're back tomorrow. We've got Trevor
Butler.
Trevor Butler.
Interesting as well.
Yeah, it should be very interesting again tomorrow. Well, it depends what kind of witness he is, I guess. But it has the potential to be interesting. That'll be day 10, and that'll be it for phase 3. And that'll be it for 2 years of the inquiry, which I don't think, people don't quite get how, how much of a gap is about to happen. We'll not have anything new for quite some time after tomorrow. So hopefully we'll get something of real interest tomorrow. And anything either of you are looking forward to?
No.
It being over, personally, I think.
Yeah, it being over.
But, I'll be doing a Twitter Spaces again tonight at 7:00. I haven't done. I'll do a thing for it now. If you've been following proceedings, or even if you haven't, you don't need an account to listen, but you do need to use your phone Twitter app if you want to speak. But yeah, please join us for that. Otherwise, we'll see you again 10:00 tomorrow morning for the last day of the inquiry hearings this time around. Cheers.